Hey, it's Aaron, the Metal Theologian. It's been a busy week, man. A couple videos last week, streaming last Friday with Heavy Metallurgy. That was a fun show, actually. It's always fun going on that show, but that was a particularly fun one because we got to buzz out some of the really obscure shit, right? And it looks like I might be streaming this coming Thursday, too, around 8, so I don't want to say too much in case it falls apart, but hopefully it'll be fun. So, I was actually testing with a relatively new guy in the vinyl community, Louis Golden, and he was talking about Sun Ra, and I was like, something, I haven't done a Sun Ra video in a while, and sort of more to the point, because I've done more than one video where I was like, oh, these are my favorite Sun Ra records, and those, they kind of oscillate, but there are like 20 or so that are the ones that I kind of really come back to, and then like, anytime I go on a kick, there'll be like 3 or 4 of those, and like 2 others that I don't normally reach for, and that's kind of how I take that shit in. But I was thinking it might be a good topic to talk about things that like are around right now, because the reissues kind of go and kind of come and go. They're sort of in print and out of print, like those Scorpio ones that were kind of cheap, but at least had like the Saturn covers and shit, and made the shit available. Most importantly, those were super easy to find for a long time. I didn't spend more than $10 for most of my Sun Ra records because they were just everywhere. At one point when I was getting into jazz, I actually made a rule where I didn't let myself buy Sun Ra records because I could always pick 1 or 2 and they would always be great. And I was trying to challenge myself a little bit more. I was like, if I go with more fucking Sun Ra records, I know they're going to be good, but I'm trying to like learn about this genre. So that was like after I got into jazz and like really started to appreciate Sun Ra because I kind of hadn't previously. Anyway, so this is just sort of like a little bit of a rundown on some of the records that are out there right now. The ones that I'm actually seeing reissues currently available of in 2023. And, most of these have come out over the last 2 years or so. But these are some of the ones that I see kicking around. And really the main sort of impetus for doing this was this one. Because this one has very recently been reissued. I think it's another one of those modern harmonic ones. They're kind of not my favorite, but they do a fine job with the things. They changed the cover a little bit, but Universe in Blue, I swear, is one of my favorite records by this guy. And it's funny what it does to my lighting, too, like when the camera tries to compensate for the blue. You see that shit? Look at that. All right, anyway. So that's that's what Sun Ra does. It changes your perspective. It makes the world look different. It makes you see colors you didn't see before. That's what this fucking record's all about. So what could I say that the camera isn't already telling you before I even open my fucking mouth, man? Right there, you need this thing because it's just so fucking good. Look at that back cover, man. So the cover on the reissue, this is like a reproduction of one of the old ones from the 70s. The reissue has it has this picture on it, but like the layout's kind of cheesier. Honestly, the layout's more like this. I really kind of hate what they did with this one, too. And I'm actually not going to be talking about Raw to the Rescue because even though it's right here and I've played it a couple times, I haven't really taken it in like I've taken in these other ones. Like generally I'm talking about Sun Ra. These are records I've listened to at least a couple times. And, feel like I can speak to a little bit. And this one I don't have that, so. That one, or actually, this one I haven't really listened to yet either. That's the one that just came out this last record store day. So anyway, if you're just going to get one, man, fucking Universe in Blue. This is one of like probably 5 that I would recommend because it has the weird stuff. It has the shit that like really sort of swings and grooves and like sucks you in. I mean, really notably on a Black Man with the June Tyson vocal, which is just so fucking hot, man. It's just such an intense delivery. It's just, I mean, she's a great singer, and like I dig her at a lot of records. But once in a while, there's a performance where you're just like, God damn, man. And this is one of them on this record. Yeah, it's just a great record, man. It has all the freedom you expect in a Sun Ra record, but with all that sort of, sort of the discipline, like that sort of big band aesthetic that was so anachronistic in the fucking 70s and still so on point with the electronics and just so cool. This record just has everything, man. This is Sun Ra right there. So, now if you try and nail me down and say, okay, so which one's better, that one or Night of the Purple Moon? That's not really a question I can answer. Even if I do answer, it's not necessarily going to be the right answer if you ask me again a week later, Another one I kind of wanted to hype a little bit is this one got reissued, again, sometime within the last couple of years. This one was kind of hard to find for a long time. So when Sun Ra went to he made a deal with Impulse like in the early 70s, and the deal was supposed to be to reissue, I think it was 8 of the old Saturn records, and so those are most of the Impulse ones you see around are those. Like, they renamed Supersonic Jazz as Supersonic Sounds, but other than that, it's just like the same old Saturn titles, like Angels and Demons at Play is one, or The Nubians of Plutonio is another one. Anyway, they were also going to do 4 albums that were original albums just for Impulse. 2 of them didn't get released at the time. They've actually since come out. One is Symbols, which is fucking great, and the other one is something about crystals. That one's really great too, though. And that one was reissued recently too. It's like really electronic, that one. This one, okay, so of the 2 that came out, one was Astro Black, which is also a really cool record. When it's wild, it's wild. I feel like that one gets a little bit cheesier in places though than this one. Where this one is probably, if you were gonna take a record of Sun Ra's that was like a true free jazz record that really sort of represented his spirit though, in a way that I feel like his ESP records kind of don't. I think Pathways to Unknown Worlds is about the best you can do. I mean, if it's choice between this and Atlantis, yeah, I'd go Atlantis. But if it's choice between this and the Magic City, I think I would take this one, honestly, over the Magic City. I just feel like this record coheres better and just a more enjoyable listen. So yeah, a lot of times I don't spend a lot of time talking about the Impulse records, but this is the one sort of exception. There's the gatefold. And obviously I'm not slagging Impulse. I mean, by the time they were working with Sun Ra, Impulse is kind of a shadow of its former self. I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, the ABC Impulse logo is already kind of a harbinger of less good things to come. I think this also just has a plain old ABC label. Anyway, it doesn't matter, you know, who cares about this label minutia? The point is, most of the Impulse records are great, but they're reissues of Saturns, so I tend to think of them as Saturns. This one was only an Impulse, and this is one of the better ones you can get right now. Talk about these. These kind of go together because these are both kind of stripped down. This one came out a couple years ago, like maybe 3 years ago now or something. God is More Than Love Can Ever Be. This is one of the ones I've been looking out for. And then this one, Omniverse, just came out, I think within the last year. And they're both relatively small band. This one's actually just a trio, I think, for the whole thing. There might be a couple of guest spots on it. But this is mostly a trio record. And it's funny because I almost feel like it sounds more piano-focused than some of the piano solo records he did right around the same time. It really kind of feels like a piano jazz record in a way that some of the more exploratory ones don't so much. Not that this one doesn't have any, like, exploration shit. This is still definitely a Sun Ra record, right? And it's a nice record, but it's kind of on the tame side. It's a little bit more tame than I expected it to be. This one also doesn't, like, really sort of rip your face off with its sort of experimentalism, that sort of thing. But this one just feels like Sun Ra, mostly with a trio and with a few horns sort of here and there, a couple other instruments guesting. I think it might just be horns. He plays extra drums on 1 or 2 songs. This one feels like just a straight jazz record, but played by Sun Ra, or not Sun Ra's full band, but Sun Ra's band, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a hard bop record. It definitely sounds like the free jazz has been internalized and like digested and is now expressing itself in a form of jazz that isn't really free jazz. But I say that about like Jackie McLean records from the 60s too, and like the Bobby Hutcherson records from that era. And this does that in a really different way, you know, because it doesn't really lean on those idioms at all. You know, it leans on the idioms a lot. I mean, it doesn't do things like repurpose old songs and that sort of thing. These are all originals, and it's, you know, Omniverse, Visitant of the Ninth Ultimate. I mean, it's the same old Sun Ra crap and spirit, you know what I mean? So from that standpoint, it's not like we're doing Yesterdays now and, you know, Route 66. It's like, no, it's still like legitimate shit, but it's a really cool record, man. I find it hard to describe in a way that I find a lot of sort of 70s really good jazz to describe, because there's certain things where it's like, I feel like if it just sounds like really good jazz and there aren't like specific flourishes for me to sort of hang my hat on as a hook to sort of express it, I have sort of trouble getting it out there. And this kind of falls into that category, but I think that if you know what the, you know, if you know what a record like this sounds like, which is a great one, you know, and just forget about like I don't know, it's a hit, I guess, the nuclear war, which I don't know that it was actually a hit, but anyway, it's sort of like this, except in a smaller setting, you know. And all instrumental, incidentally. Yeah. So the other one I wanted to call out was this one, because this one's entirely new material that they just unearthed, like within the last 6 months or so, maybe a year. I think. But I don't think time flies that fast. I don't know. It's 2022. Anyway, um, yeah, this is him playing on some sort of synth, and that's like, you want to get me to fucking buy a Sun Ra record and be really excited about it. Say, oh, hey, he found this fucking synth at some guy's house and he played it for like a couple of sessions. That's what this thing is. This thing doesn't really sound like that kind of a jam session, though. It actually sounds like a jazz record that they put together and maybe didn't build around this instrument, but this instrument definitely complements. Now, kind of the downside is it kind of sounds like an organ a lot of the time, but this doesn't sound like an organ jazz record. You know what I mean? It sounds like it has, you know, the Prophet synthesizer, whatever the hell that is. There's like a spec book at reproduction inside here and that sort of thing. But for my money, man, this is just a cool record. If you like the electronic sound in your jazz, but you don't like soul jazz, you can't do much better than this. But what you really need to do is come around on the soul jazz, because I'll tell you something, man. Fucking Jack McDuff is nobody's chump, right? Fucking, spacing someone's name and it's bothering me. Fuck it, I'll drop it. This is what we're listening to, by the way. I'm actually kind of digging this. I put this on the other night and it didn't like do anything for me at all. So I was wondering if I'd like it more when I was listening to this shit, or when I was talking about other shit, just in a different frame of mind, maybe. Yeah, this is Hajj by Muslim Gauze, and I just think this whole like fucking like intifada thing that the guy was into is kind of hilarious now with retrospect, but I guess it was really intimidating back then, like dedicating your record to Yasser Arafat and shit. Yeah, it's mostly like this though. It's like weird ambient shit, and when I'm in the right mood, it's really sort of interesting, you know, because he kind of has his own take on it. You know, you wouldn't confuse a Muslim Gauze record with a Soviet France record. I think I like Soviet France more, but I also have a much longer history with Soviet France, like just sort of as far as my personal music journey goes. So in 20 years, maybe I'll change my mind. Speaking of things I'll change my mind about in 20 years, here's one thing I don't see myself changing my fucking mind on, because I've been talking about this Stevie Wonder kick that I've been on. I've been listening to a lot of fucking Stevie Wonder. And I haven't been listening to exclusively Stevie Wonder. It's just like, I've been taking, like, okay, so I listened to all my 70s records today. So I'll just show them real quick in the order that I played them. I played Talking Book first. I don't remember why. I kind of want to get a copy of this with the Braille on the cover. Maybe I was trying to turn those up. Then I played Music of My Mind, because I've had the song Love Having You Around in my head for like the last 3 or 4 days, something like that. But right now I'm thinking about I Love Every Little Thing About You, which is just such a like sweet and guileless song, you know? Like Stevie does so much shit where if he's weren't so there with the sincerity and just like the genuineness of it, you know, like the kind of fucking honesty that brings a tear to your eye, you know? A lot of the stuff would just be cheesy, but as it is, it's just brilliant, man. What a great sleeper of a record this is. This is kind of the newest one, actually. I just got this like a week ago. I've had it in the past, right? But I hadn't rebought it or something when I was... Long story, not really worth it. Anyway, I was surprised to find I didn't have a copy of this. Unfortunately, I had seen one recently. But again, this is such a great record. And like the fucking... just the fact that, I mean, it's really like a Stevie Wonder record is really like a Stevie Wonder record, pretty much, you know. I'll have someone come in and play like guitar and shit, and there's some horns on these records and shit too, but just the fact that he's such a big part of it, you know what I mean? Like the drums, all the electronics, and obviously the vocals, you know, which are just, so heartfelt, but so like pure and bright. It's like, I don't know, man, listening to Stevie Wonder record is like getting a hug, you know? Close it out with Inner Visions. But I played all of these all the way through. 6 sides of this one, including the 45. All right, I've been listening to a lot of fucking Stevie Wonder. So like when we're talking about like when I'm saying shit like the metal theologian is the biggest Stevie Wonder fan, you know, I'm not fucking around, man. Maybe a little bit. I've been playing the 60s records though too. They're all over filed right now, but I got a copy of Uptight last week too. Kind of rough, but dude, that hits the spot. And I forgot about how bad some of the covers were on those 60s records. Like, I remember what the cover was on that one that put me off. It might have been Blowing in the Wind. Then there was that dreadful cover of Mr. Tambourine Man off Down to Earth. And I'm like, dude, Stevie Wonder does not need to do a Bob Dylan cover. You know? Here's a classic that maybe I haven't hyped enough. The Suicide debut album. You know, you might be thinking, this is kind of far removed from Stevie Wonder. That's sort of ironic. But you know what the through line is in all this shit? The fucking electronics. The Sun Ra electronics. I could talk about that for an hour. The fucking Stevie Wonder, the shit that he was doing with electronics. I mean, the thing about Stevie is he has these simple pop songs that sound so sweet. And you listen to them, and like you hear these more and more layers in there, like all this synth shit going on in there. It's like it sounds like just like a simple tune, and then you listen to it a little more closely. There's like all sorts of like awesome shit. And it's all just right there. This is like the opposite of that because this is just like a fucking skeleton by comparison. I mean, this isn't even this whole skeleton. This is just like a rib cage of a fucking record, right? These two fucking guys. I always love the fact that on the credits it has Alan Vega for vocals and then Martin Rev, instrument, singular, because it was just his one fucking synth. But this is a hell of a record, man. I was about 20 when I bought this, and it still blows my mind, man. I just played it last night, and it fucking... There's nothing else that sounds like Suicide, man. And I'll tell you something else. If you've got a way of life, and you're going, I got what it's about. If you even have the second record, and you're like, oh, I know what it's about. Right here, man. Some of the earlier demo shit too. Actually, if you can get your hands on some of that, it's pretty good. But this record was one of those records that just sort of changed my idea about what music could be. You know, by the time I discovered the Muslim Gauze, I had too many records like the Suicide record. Well, I got into Soviet France before I got into Muslim Gauze, right? So like I sort of knew what to expect, even though it was a different take. You know, that's kind of what it's like. From that standpoint, Suicide is sort of a cornerstone. And my appreciation for Suicide is probably one of the things that led me back to Stevie Wonder. And that's no bullshit. That's like, honest to God. Speaking of being predictable, since I was talking about Killing Joke last time, I finally got another copy of this. And aside from the fact that I still, 30 years later, I still can't get over what cornballs these fucking guys look like. I mean, no wonder a fucking rocker like me was a little put off by some of this Killing Joke shit when they're fucking looking like that. And like, I'm a metal guy, right? It's like, what the fuck? You know, this is a really good record. And Paul Ferguson is still on it, because the deal with Killing Joke, man, the forward drive of the drums is so intense and so great on those early records. And it's still there on Nighttime, but it's not as intense as it is on the first four. And you know something? Eric Bauer was hyping one of the later records to me because I was thinking I should check out some of the reunion records. You know, I mean, I saw them after this record. I saw them on the Extremities tour. They blew me away. And I like that record a lot, too. But I listened to a more recent one because I wanted to check it out. And I fucking, honestly, I hated it. Because the guy was playing like a straight, like 4/4 beat. I was like, what's he doing with that fucking hi-hat? You know? It's like when Paul Ferguson's playing, it's all just fucking toms and shit and just like... just bashing it, and the beat's like backwards, which pushes the whole song forwards sort of counterintuitively, but it totally makes sense if you're listening to it because of where the accents are, you know, and these weird like fucked up patterns, and that just drives the whole Killing Joke sound just so like completely. Man, I feel like I should come up with an example. You know something? Here's a fucking example. I wasn't even thinking of this one, but this is the only one that happens to be sitting here. This is my, by a previous owner, defiled 12-inch copy of the Turn to Red 12-inch. So, on last Friday's stream, when I was on the heavy metallurgy stream. We were talking about some rare records. And as anyone who watches Let's Talk Metal, hosted by Mr. Alan Colson, if you watch his channel, you know that he has some kind of crazy shit. And I was kind of amazed that he had some doubles. Some of the things that he had doubles of, right? Like cover variants, that sort of thing I get. You know, I don't collect like that, but I've been friends with other people who have in the past. But Alan had a 45. Not this one, obviously. They were identical pretty much, except, like, obviously the recordings and the covers were different. But the two different versions of it, there's one where, like, you know, sometimes they would have, like, these center, like, plastic pieces in there so you could play it on a regular spindle, but you could break it out if you wanted the big hole for your jukebox or something like that. Yeah, those are the two different variants. And he had one with the small hole, and then one with, like, the intact breakaway piece in the middle. And I was like, dude, you're a fucking lunatic. Now, I'm not that bad, okay? But I sort of made a joke about the cover of this. It didn't bother me enough to get another copy of the 12-inch. It did bother me enough that I got a copy of the 7-inch. Because that way I have all the songs on the big one, and if I just want to enjoy the cover, I have it on the 45, which feels a little more sort of authentic and a little bit more DIY. I'm actually not sure that's true, but it sounds convincing, so I'll go with it for the moment. Alright, so I actually haven't played this, so watch this song make an ass out of me. Because I haven't listened to it in like a week. Bump this out of the next song. Okay, this isn't the best example, but you hear that drum pattern anyway, because it still exemplifies it. And this is what Paul Ferguson does on these things. I don't talk about this a lot, but I kind of just figured this out about the whole Killing Joke thing. He'll use a different number of beats, and he'll put in all sorts of different kinds of drum patterns. But fundamentally, he always puts something really forward in the measure. He puts some like accented beats that is outside of what you normally hear in rock music, and he puts it in somewhere in the front of the measure, and then he'll repeat that and intensify it. He's doing that here, even though he's not filling as much around it as he does on his other records. So next time you bust out your Killing Joke records, listen for that shit. And hopefully in a few years, or a few months, a few days, really. Hopefully I'll be able to come around and dig some of the later Killing Joke a little bit more, sort of. Once I've sort of distanced myself from this, like, weird parasocial relationship I have with Paul Ferguson at the moment. At least his drums. I don't know anything about him. I can't say I particularly care, but he's a fucking hell of a drummer. Actually, I was listening to The Weight, and I actually don't have the Metallica record anymore, but you know, by my age, you can probably tell that, well, maybe not. By my age and taste combined, you can probably tell that it was Metallica that put me on to Killing Joke in the first place. So I went back and listened to The Weight again off that thing, like on YouTube or something. And dude, Lars doesn't play that fucking beat. Like he does at the beginning, like for the entrance, but this dude fucking keeps going, right? And Lars, like, as soon as he gets in the verse, he like slacks back and just fucking standard 4/4. I'm like, fuck you, dude. Fucking Lars, man. What a great drummer. As great as his art collection. I'm just talking shit because it's fun to talk shit about Lars. I'm actually not down on Metallica like I was for about 20 years. Like after the Napster thing, it took me about 20 years to get completely over that, but I'm completely over it now, and now it's all in jest. If Lars came to my door, he'd come in and I'd make him a drink. It wouldn't be like, fuck you, why'd you make the fucking Black Album? Why'd you treat Jason like shit, you know? Like all that fucking like baggage that metalheads have. See, because that's the corollary, you know? I really believe that one of the reasons you see metal channels disproportionately on YouTube is because metal was so heavily stigmatized for so many years that the people who were willing to say, yeah, fuck that shit, and I would like that shit anyway, and get a chip on their shoulder over it, were also sort of people who were inclined to come back around 30 years later and proselytize about it. So you get me, you get Scott Waters, you get Harmless Rebel, you get Greeno, you get Alan, you get Chromie D. I guarantee you, for not one of us was this our first argument that we ever got into with someone about music. Not for one of us. So if you're a new Beatles fan and you're like, why the fuck are these metal guys so belligerent all the time? We might hate the Beatles, but it's not that we hate the Beatles. It's just that's how we talk about music, man. That's what makes it fun. So anyway, on that note, yeah, I'm still thinking about doing a video on my stack, which has grown a little bit actually. My stack of metal records that I put aside for myself when I go on my next metal kick. Anyway, though, thanks for watching. It's a late one even for me. It's almost 2 in the morning. See you next time. Maybe Thursday.